You're on.
Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump webinar. This week, it's been a bit of a crazy week this week already because we've been trying to get things all sorted out. So for those who've been listening to us over the last couple of weeks, we've now started to really develop the podcasts and they should be going live in March, which is really, really good. But this week, we are running our normal webinars. And this week, our webinar is a very straightforward webinar. How do you attract, retain, and develop your top recruiters as a leader, especially in 2025, if year 2025 is going to be the year of growth? And I'm just going to put two stats out there so people can understand what we're talking about. According to the recruitment marketplace, year one, new recruits, it's between 60 and 70% attrition every year. Average recruitment attrition is 43% according to Perkbox. So it says that we've got to work harder at what we are doing with regards to recruiting the right people, embedding them into our culture, and driving from there. So today we're going to look very heavily at that and work from there. So I've got the full team on today. So guys, there's all of us on, so we're going to have to be quick and snappy with our questions. Not looking at anybody, but we're quick and snappy with our questions. So first question we're going to jump into. What are the biggest mistakes recruitment leaders make when trying to attract top talent?
Who's going first? Martin looks desperate to speak.
Thanks for chucking me under the bus, Paul. I will go first, and I will be quick, Howard. So I think the first mistake people make is not understanding what top talent is for them. Because top talent, and by that I mean people who have performed consistently in one organization, doesn't necessarily guarantee they will mirror that performance in another one. Because I think that top performance is made up of many things. It's someone's personal traits. So it's their curiosity, their sales ability, their emotional empathy. And then you layer on top of that their discipline, their processes, and how they go about working. And then you put on top of that their tools that they have to use, the technology, the culture that they sit within, for example. And I've had many times where over the years I've hired someone from a really rigid, disciplined sales environment, brought them into my culture that was different to that, and they failed. And that's not to say they're a bad recruiter. It's just to say that I didn't interview them in the right way to understand their motivation. So the first thing I would say to any recruitment leader is know what your culture and your business is like to work within, and then hire people that are aligned to those values, processes, technology tools, and discipline.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what you said, Martin. It was pretty much where I was going to come from. I think the biggest mistake people make in our industry when they're taking on top billers is they're only focused on the revenues that these people have allegedly brought into the business. Very often, and it's a common mistake, these top billers come from organizations that have got contracts, large opportunities, and they are all right, great credit to them, but they are service recruiters. They're not 360-degree recruiters. They're not necessarily capable of going out and bringing in new business. What they've done successfully is to generate revenue from contracts that are already in the business. So you often see that with the larger recruitment companies. And if you're a small business and you're bringing in somebody that's got these big figures, you need to make sure that they have the ability to self-start, that they have the ability to go out and generate new opportunities. I think the other thing that is often a mistake is that recruitment owners think that these individuals are going to bring business with them. And that doesn't happen very often. Not only have they got restrictive covenants, but again, back to the point, the other organization, the previous employer have got set agreements. Those companies are not going to move with those individuals. So check out their ability to develop new opportunities, that they have an entrepreneurial spirit. And to your second point, I couldn't agree more, Martin. I think we'll come to this. Behaviours and values is crucially important. Make certain you interview for behaviours and values. Even if they are brilliant 360-degree recruiters and can make you money, make sure they fit. Because if they cause problems in your business, they may well make money for you, but you'll lose other consultants around them. So make certain that they fit everything that you've set out as a cultural necessity for your business.
And to add to what both of you have said, I think the biggest mistake recruitment leaders make when interviewing and trying to acquire top talent is not assessing why people left in the first place.
Yeah.
we have a terrible ratio, as Howard said at the beginning, of not keeping people, whether they're good or not. We just don't recruit as well as we should. And we spend so little time assessing why people left. And often we put it down to them. It's their fault. They didn't fit in with us. They couldn't get our culture. So before you interview anybody in 2025, have a look at the people who've left you and find out why. Some of it clearly will be down to them. Some of it will be also about you as an individual or your company or the market or whatever. But if you've got a really good understanding of why people have left your organisation in the last couple of years, and you can answer that intelligently, articulately, that will make you understand in a more cohesive way about the type of people you want to attract.
So I think it's really a straightforward thing. I think what everyone said there is absolutely right. You've got to know your own values and your own behaviours. And if you don't understand your own values and your own behaviours, then what are you recruiting? We so often recruit on skills and then fire on behaviours, when actually we should be recruiting on skills and training and developing, recruit on behaviours and training and developing skills. And this, where I think is one of the biggest skills that we are poor at, is that we know that there's a very high turnover in recruitment in year one. There's a very high turnover in recruitment, full stop. And yet we do not blame ourselves. We constantly blame the person, when actually it's the process of actually getting the person in that is at fault. So I think what we've got to start to do is have a look at ourselves and have a look at our process of recruiting the right person in. And if we change that process, then we start to get the right person. We can't keep blaming the people. It's just the wrong person I've recruited. It's the wrong person. They weren't right for this. Well, they passed your recruitment process. So we've got to start to do something about the recruitment process, I think, from there. So moving forward then, how can leaders create a culture that naturally retains high performers?
Can I question the question, Howard?
You can question the question, David. You'll get the same answer as you did last week.
What's coming now?
Well, I know. I'm still recovering. Most businesses, most of the people in most businesses are not high performers. They're performers. If we are constantly looking for the elite for every role, and we're talking about recruitment, yeah, I think we're going to come unstuck, and I think the expectation gap is going to be too close. If we've got an elite sales force where the top 20%, 30% are really good high performers, that's fantastic. We want people to perform, and then as they join us and perform, our culture and our management and our leadership will encourage some of those to be high performers. But if at the outset we're constantly looking for the very, very high performers, the Ronaldos, the Messis, the Miles Lewis,
Dave Pies.
Or not the Dave Pies. You just want because most of our people in all walks of our recruitment life, by the way, not just the salespeople, but I'm talking about support services, the ones that actually are the lifeblood of our business. We want good people that our culture helps make them even better. So my first bit on that is just to manage our own expectations. Let's get the good people in and make them better.
Yeah.
Don't always just interview the superstars, because you'll be disappointed.
I totally agree with that, actually. But if just to the point that if you do have somebody that is a top biller, a superstar, as you described them, then back to the point that Martin was making, you've got to make sure they fit. Because if you end up with, as we've talked many times on these webinars, about a maverick, somebody that can make you money, but is going to cause all sorts of issues. I think Howard often refers to them as internal terrorists. I think then you've got yourself an issue. And in that sense, and this may sound really odd from somebody that's been in the industry for nearly 50 years, I would rather have a group of decent quality performers, as you put it, who aren't necessarily going to be massive billers, but are consistent, settle into the culture, happy in the business, people we love seeing every day, enjoy working alongside. I'd rather have those guys than that very high performing terrorist that Howard often makes reference to all day long. Because I think one of the things that we have to remember is that, we spend more time at work and alongside our colleagues than we do with others in our personal lives. And making sure that when we come into work, we're pleased and even delighted to see the people we're going to work alongside, that we enjoy supporting each other, that we have a family unit, is vitally important. I think that we all know the old adage about people join companies and leave bosses, and I think that can also be said about cultures. And Howard made that point that people leave not because of the business necessarily, but because they feel they don't fit. And we know that as recruiters because we constantly interview people who are leaving jobs because they're unhappy in their environments, not the job itself or the job description, the duties, the actual culture. So to create a culture that retains high performers or even your good quality performers, you've got to drive towards that family environment that supports and cares for people, that's a fun place to be, but also importantly that people adhere because they want to adhere to the behaviours and cultures of that organisation.
I'd also say as well, as a leader, you can become obsessed with trying to create a culture for other people. It's your business. The most important person in that business is you as the leader. Create a culture that you are comfortable within, because integrity and authenticity are absolutely critical from a leader. And people will leave a business where their leader is not consistent, doesn't look comfortable, isn't relaxed. So look to create the culture that gets the best out of you as a leader, and then work with the staff to evolve that so that they feel comfortable as well, and hire people that suit that culture that you're looking for as well.
So I'm going to challenge my own question and then challenge Dave's challenge of his own question.
Hang on a minute here.
Yeah, hang on a minute. There's a challenge coming. So I think what you're saying, Dave, is partially right, but partially wrong. It's about creating a culture that naturally retains high performers. And high performers will be retained if they're happy in their job and they feel like they're growing and moving forward. Now, if you think about most businesses, 20% are underperforming, 60% are performing, and 20% are super performing. So it's that 20% that we're looking at. However, it's the 60% that make the culture. So if we're looking after that 60% and growing that 60%, now it's the 20% of the high performers and the 20% of low performers that affect the culture. So if we make sure that our 60% in the middle is really looked after and really developed, and we make sure that our high performers are really looked after, developed, we start to create a really strong sales culture. And that increases the capability and capacity of our 60%, which we therefore get more money out of. However, if our 20% at either end is affecting that 60%, then we've got to address those ends, whether that be the high performing end or the poor performing end. And I think that's what we tend not to do. We tend to allow that 20% high performing end or the 20% low performing end. Basically, I think they dominate the culture. And once we get the middle part motivated and driving, you get more out of that middle part. So I think it's about creating a high performing culture right across the business. It's not about the high performers, but the culture will retain them. But if they run roughshod over everybody else, then you lose your high performing culture and your 60% disappear really quickly. So I think that's a slightly different sort of viewpoint. And it was your comment there, Dave, that maybe sort of think a little bit more, deeper about that question and working from there. So what role do behaviours and values, then, if we're talking about culture and behaviours and values, what roles do behaviours and values play in building a successful recruitment team? And how can recruitment leaders embed their behaviours and values?
I think the first place to start, and we've said this, is to actually know what your behaviours and values are as a leader. What is it you want in your business? I'm not convinced in the years that I've worked in the industry, and particularly since I started working in this capacity as an advisor, that's been now 17 years, that many people actually have a very firm understanding of what their behaviours and values are, or what they would like them to be. And I think unless you, as an owner, as a leader, sit down and really think through what is it I want, and we've kind of alluded to this point, well, you can't really then expect other people to follow your lead. So I think it starts with the owners, starts with the founders, the leaders. What is it we want? And there is no rule about this. We all know businesses that have that, as I mentioned earlier, family environment. We also know businesses who have been extremely successful that have been the very old style recruitment sweatshops, really, but we know that people have worked there for many years and have been happy to work there. And it's interesting because I think when we think of culture, we kind of make reference in our own minds to what we would like to see in a business. And it's different strokes for different folks. Some people are very happy indeed in working in KPI driven environments that are hugely competitive, where they can make lots of money and then go out every night and whatever. And those environments, we don't need to mention the businesses, we all know them, some of us come from them. And then there are others that are much more warm and empathetic and so forth. So it's horses for courses. And again, back to the first question, when you're interviewing people, prospective people for your business, then you're looking, or you should be looking at, are they going to work well within our environment, our culture, particularly if they're coming from a very different, a polar opposite culture. So I think those are important. And to the question, how do you essentially develop and build a successful environment with behaviors and values? Know what they are in the first instance and stick to them. These should be unmovable things, immovable things that you believe in from the bottom of your heart and others around you believe in, and stick to your guns. And where it goes wrong is when we invite people in who really don't share those values.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think I get really frustrated with businesses talking about values because quite often they spend a lot of time and effort and often a marketing budget to come up with 3 words they stick below a logo and think they've achieved their values.
Yes.
Where if you work within a business, it's behaviors that are more important to you. Values are pointless if your behaviors don't reflect them and you can't see and feel them in the behaviors. And I'd also say that we're obsessed as an industry with rewarding and recognizing output, which sometimes can be chance. All the will in the world, you can go through a good process. Some good results happen, some bad results happen. We need to recognize, if not reward, good behaviors. So if an individual is operating in the right way, using the system in the right way, data entry, or they're giving a candidate and a customer a great experience, even if it's not financially rewarding them, we should recognize the behaviors that we want to see in the business by calling it out and celebrating it. So that's something that a leader can do to bring those behaviors to life.
So I think I agree with everything that everyone said, but I also think there's a point here that we go back to the first 2 questions and the mistakes we make when recruiting people, and the mistakes that we allow our high performers sometimes to dominate a culture in a negative way. And therefore, I always think that when you start to build behaviors around your values and what's going on, I think what you've got to start to do is take that gut reaction. Because how often do you, a leader, does that gut reaction come where you see someone that is against the behaviors or do something that outside the behaviors that you don't like, and you let it ride? Let it ride because you don't want to upset the apple cart, when actually that's chipping at the infrastructure. It's stripping at the infrastructure of your behaviors and your values. And you're right, Martin, that when you sort of get a good marketing company to write your own values, behaviors, but your leaders don't believe in them, then it has a very different viewpoint. And you start to think about how people now, social proof companies, looking at the reviews and what's going on, looking at Glassdoor, looking at Google reviews and all those type of reviews, that's a reflection of your behaviors and values. If you're not getting great reviews, and I often say about reviews, we get good reviews because we go out and ask for good reviews. However, how often do you get that unsolicited review? How often do people feel that they can do that? And that's a direct reflection of your behaviors and values. So I think as leaders, to embed them, you've got to understand your own, as we've said, and embed them. And then if you get that little gut feel that someone's chipping away at your infrastructure of values and behaviors, you have to address that immediately and not allow that to happen. Otherwise, it just becomes, an epidemic of bad behavior, and that spreads through the business very quickly and hits the culture of how things move. So talking about then, what practical steps can leaders take to develop their recruiters beyond the traditional training program?
I think this is where often a weakness, to be honest, in our industry, perhaps it's in other industries, where we pay little heed to succession planning. Too often, especially with SME recruitment business owners, the business is still over years, sometimes 20 years plus, still heavily reliant on their involvement and their presence, even their relationships with clients. And all of those recruitment owners and business owners believe that their business is worth something. And the reality is, without them, it isn't worth very much at all. You've got to work very hard at developing people that will ultimately step into your shoes, maybe buy the business from you, or at the very least, take over the running of it. And when you look, therefore, at developing people beyond traditional training programs, you've really got to be considering how you're going to grow people that are capable of running a business. And I think the interesting thing is there is a difference here in some respects between the SME independents and the rather somewhat larger corporates. Because I think when you talk to the smaller businesses, you are looking at not only getting people to manage and learn how to manage very successfully teams, but you're also teaching them how to run a business. And I think that may not be entirely the same situation when you're looking at the large corporates. It's not seat of the pants to the degree that working in a small organization is. So I think when you're looking at what sort of coaching and training you're going to give your people, it has to extend beyond. And Martin made a point about this. It's obsession, understandable obsession with making money. I think it's got to be about developing their prowess, their ability, their knowledge of running an organization. And that, I think, requires external coaching and support. It may be that comes through business schools, it may be through business coaches like us, for example, but I think you need to look outside of your own business as well as helping them to develop internally. So I think any regard or any disregard to that will probably result in people reaching a ceiling and feeling that they can't move on in your organization, and then they're likely then to go off and work for somebody else, or as we often see, set up their own businesses. They have to have a sense that there is a journey for them, that they're going somewhere, that they can see the end result, the vision that you've shared with them. And I think that comes down to succession planning and the effort you put in over several years, not just a brief spurt of training and coaching.
I think some of the best recruitment companies I've seen in terms of retention of staff are ones that use their own recruiters and their own back office, I don't know, but support services staff to develop other people. So to Paul's point, yes, using external training or sending them on courses, but also using their own recruiters. As a development tool for recruiters, they learn how to train and engage other people on the sales floor, and they grow in that way. And the ones I've seen work really well are the ones that have a plan to do that. So my tip would be, where you can, whatever your size of business is, are there aspects of the recruitment team, the HR team, the marketing team, the finance team, where the skills that the senior people have, or the more senior people have, can be passed on as part of your culture to others in the business? Because the ones I've seen do that really well have got a much higher retention rate than the ones that don't.
Yeah. And yeah, you talked about traditional training programs, and by definition, they're going to be fairly generic. They're going to provide a foundation of sales ability for an individual that you then build on. And I think that's the bit where we often fall down, is we don't take the time to understand the individual to then build on that framework to find out what works for them. I think as leaders, you have to be really clear on what are the non-negotiables. These are the processes and sales techniques that we're going to follow. But beyond that, what do you want to do to bring your personality to the sales process to really thrive? And that takes personal contact, and that takes understanding of the individual.
So I think I looked at this in very simple ways and listened to what you guys are saying. I think there's a simple point here to be made, that most recruitment agencies, their training is maybe a one-off experience, a very short-lived experience, when actually training should be ongoing, constantly, all the time. And I was delivering a training course last week in Birmingham to a number of aspiring leaders for a large recruitment agency. And I threw up a picture of a mountain and said, "You're the Sherpa. It's your job to get the candidate or your consultant up the mountain. Base camp is your training and development. So it's your standard basic training and development. The next one is for the candidate or the consultant to feel that they're 100% committed and feel value. The next one is they're adding value. So now they do feel the value, and so on. It goes up the mountain." And I asked a question then, let's say you've got a entry person into recruitment and they've got to hit 120 grand target, and they hit target. Where do they land on that mountain of your development? And virtually all of them said, "Oh, halfway up." They'd be halfway up. They already feel valued. But you're increasing their sales target from 120, let's say, to 160. So that means there's more skills required. There's more development required. So therefore, they should go back to base camp. And I think what we don't do is sector out each individual position and have different training for each individual position. And that goes back to Paul's. When you start to create that succession planning, when you get to a certain level, why aren't we bringing management training in, etc.? And this should be a constant ongoing all the way through the business, which then goes back to Dave. If you've got a business that is self-training, where you've got lots of people on the floor coaching and mentoring the people, then it becomes part and parcel of the culture. But at the moment, we don't leave that as a culture in most recruitment agencies because we don't believe the training should happen. And that includes solo businesses. Solo businesses are very good recruiters, but they only know what they know. They need to get outside of that to get trained from other people to help develop their skill set. If they want to bill 300K, great. But if you want to build 500K, that's a whole big different skill set that you need to build that. And I think that's what we do. We get very blinkered in the way that we deliver our training and what we do with our training. So how can recruitment businesses then strike the right balance between process and people to drive long-term success?
You've got to be looking now at technology to, over a period of time, to replace the repetitive, dull tasks that we all have to do. I mean, I think we already know there's a tremendous amount of choice in the market around tech, AI, and ultimately the software add-ons to your CRM, or indeed the CRMs themselves, will get cheaper. And I think what you've got to do is really look at the focus of what takes time, what's repetitive, what's dull, and you don't have to think too hard about that, because that's all about things like resourcing, CV formatting, and writing ads, and engaging candidates on our CRM. There's a whole range of things. Anything that you can do that removes time-consuming, repetitive tasks. We'll all be doing this over the next 2 to 3 years. Is going to be time that you've gained to allow your people to do the things that you want them to do. We've talked a lot about culture, people's attitudes, their behaviours, their values. That's why we recruit them, and we obviously recruit them to make money. You want to give them as much time to exercise those natural instincts, their emotional intelligence, their ability to convince, to communicate with candidates and clients. You want to provide them with more time to do that. So this blend, the right balance between process and people, is, I think, a lot to do with the platforms you put in place and you invest in. But it's also about, back to Martin's point right from the beginning, making sure that the people you're bringing into the business and the people that you have already in the company are capable of doing the things that will enable you to strike deep relationships with clients and candidates. And those people will love the fact that you're taking away the repetitive tasks and giving them space and time to do the things they love doing, which is go out, speak to candidates, speak to clients, communicate constantly. And for those people that love being a desk jockey, well, they're going to hate the fact you're going to take the repetitive tasks away from them. But for me, it is a blend, and I think gradually we're going to automate so many things that take up so much of our time that we don't even enjoy doing over the next 2 to 3 years. And that will certainly put a focus on the blend of or the abilities of the people that we have in our organizations to go out and become true consultants.
I think, Paul, I think absolutely right in terms of the way that technology is enhancing our ability to do our job. One thing I go back to answer this question is back to that first question about interviewing. I think it's really important when you interview people, you interview them about processes and how they use the tech that they've got. You know, do you use Odro? How do you use LinkedIn Recruiter? How do you use Sourcewell? How do you use whatever it is that they've used? Interview them about how they use it. And if the tech that they use is the same that you use for processing, for the processes that you do to go to get a sale, then in that respect, interview them on that. Because I've seen good people go into organizations and then get all mixed up with the tech. They don't know how to use it. They don't want to use it. They want to try and avoid it. And actually, the processes is as important as the people, because obviously the way that tech is driving our businesses now. We've got to have people who are good with tech. So I would just concentrate as much on the process as I would on the people when you're doing that interview.
I think both of you have hit the nail on the head in terms of the balance. You do need both. I'd love to be able to say that the old adage of look after your people and they'll look after your business is true. And there is truth in it, but it's not the whole truth. I think every day, every week, every month, you enter a contract with your employee and then with you that says that they will work with you for that day, for that week, for that month. They will stay in your business as long as they can be fulfilled within your business. You cannot guarantee that they'll be there for the life of your entire organization. So you have to protect the organization. And process is how you look after your business. And I think actually process is how you capture all the intelligence that your staff have. You bring it into the organization so that if, God forbid, one day one of your top performers decides that their journey lies elsewhere, you have captured what makes them special. So when someone else joins, they join a warm desk and you can build on that process. So whilst I'd love to say it's all about the people and that warm, fuzzy thing is what you look after, you have to get that balance right to protect the long time scaling ability of your business.
So I think if you think about process, to me, it's all about simplicity and efficiency. And we should be going back to our consultants constantly. And I think I said the same thing last week when they said, what the three things you concentrate on? Building your business development, building candidate pools that look like your business development, and then mastering your tech. Now, process comes in all those three areas. So if you are building efficiency into those things, it gives you more time to speak to your candidates and to your clients, develop more things from your candidates and clients. So your tech becomes very important. But we should be constantly talking to our consultants because they're the people at the coalface to find out whether we are reaping the rewards from that process. And if that process isn't reaping the rewards, then it needs to be redeveloped, redesigned, remastered, etc. But then it also needs to be retrained. Now, that could be a human process. It could be a technical process. But if we're not keeping evaluating those things, then there's a problem. And we've talked about this in the past about, you look at your execution to, so your strategy to execution gap. In the middle of it is all your processes. So if you're not hitting your strategy and you're executing really hard, then what we've got to do in the middle of it and think is the processes that are at fault. So we've got to keep addressing the process, and the people closest to the processes, in most recruitment agencies, bar solo agencies, the people closest are the salespeople, and therefore salespeople, back office, they are close to the process, so they should be ones that having to lead the drive to redevelop those processes. So how can then, let's change this slightly then. What do you think then the number one reason recruiters leave a business is, and how can a leader prevent that?
I think the number one. Sorry, Dave, you first.
I would say the number one reason that I've seen is that expectations are not met. When we interview people, we are keen to get people, and we talk about our business with excitement because that's the right thing to do. But then when the candidate gets in, often it isn't what they think it is. And that is why I think a lot of people leave. That also applies to people who've been with companies a long time. Yeah, they think something's going to happen, in terms of promotion, in terms of client relationships, in terms of moving up into the finance team, in terms of different approach to marketing. Their expectations are different than our expectations. And when they don't meet, often the grass is greener and they leave. And that for me, is the number one reason. And what you can do about it is make sure that there is alignment. Constantly when you're with people who've been with you 3, 4, 5, 6 years, do you understand why they're still there? Yeah, are they delivering for you what you need? And are you on top of the drivers, the purpose, the values, the behaviours, whatever it is that they're about? And if you can, pretty much get that right, then it's more likely that people are going to stay long term. But part of the reason why people leave so quickly in the first year is that just the expectations aren't met either way.
I think you're spot on, Dave. I think there are. I'll just endorse what you've said. I think that the reasons people leave, the main reasons are exactly what you've said, that their expectations are not met. The glossy brochure they were sold at the interview isn't anywhere near the experience they've had. That's the whole thing about employer value proposition, that your external face as a business needs to be reflected inside. You know, the expectation that you have as a consumer or an employee of about a business should be exactly what you experience when you're working in the business. And when that doesn't align, people get pretty disillusioned. I think the second point is that if the business is not doing well, so you know what you've been sold is an organization that is doing okay or doing very well, it's very vibrant, it's very busy, it's profitable, and you get there and you find actually everybody's struggling or the business is struggling, and you get concerned about your security, you're worried about the prospect that the business isn't going to succeed or it's going to bump along the bottom, then of course another agency that's offering you the opportunity to come work in a more vibrant experience, I think is quite palatable. So I think you've got to be honest with people on interviews about it and try, as we said earlier, to find the right kind of people that match the values and the behaviors. But it comes from the leaders. And if you as a leader are very clear about where the business is going and you work every single day at talking about and in fact behaving in the right ways around your behaviors and values, and you are ambitious and you are, to Dave's point, giving people career opportunities, development, they can see a future, they can see the business is moving in the right direction, there's a vibe and excitement about it, they'll stick around. But if any of the things that Dave described or I've described are not present, you run a real risk that people will leave.
I think you've both really well covered the kind of that first year bump and making sure that the environment is as people expected and that they're seeing the values lived and breathed in the organization. So I think I'll answer it from the perspective of someone that's been in the business for 2 or 3 years. So you're kind of cash cow recruiters that have been around for a while. And those people still leave organizations. And I believe the main reason they leave is because they no longer feel that their ambitions and goals will be met within that organization. And the ambitions and goals could be financial, it could be developmental, it could be career progression, it could be anything. And I think that is the art of this, is that as a leader, you should never assume that you know cast iron what someone's goals are in any given moment, because they will change in over weeks and months and years. So the best thing that you as a leader can do is to have regular meetings with your staff, not performance related, but about motivations and goals. Get to understand that individual and then work together to create a roadmap for how they can achieve their goals within a business, because their goals will change over time. And if you do it on the 1st of January and the next appraisal you have is the 1st of January the next year, they may have left in that time. And if you blur the boundary between this conversation and a pure performance conversation, then guess what happens? It gets drawn towards the performance and not the motivation. So you have to have that separate, standalone, motivational, goal, aspirational conversation with your staff regularly.
I'm going to approach this from two sides. I'm going to approach it from that year one side, then above that year one side. So I've got a company that has less than 10% attrition. Year one, they set zero expectations of their staff. Zero KPIs, zero expectation. To them, it's all about training and development to get them through the year one. So in year two, they can start to perform. And so they don't have a performance plan until the year two. In year one, though, it's all about their developmental skills. Are they doing the right things? Are they getting the right habits? Are they gaining the right habits? Once they've got them through that year one, then again, what they're doing is leading them and saying, right, this is what we're expecting. And they put expectations, not targets. So if they don't hit it, it's not a penalty. However, their commission plan drives the behaviors that they want. It's driven around their performance, but the expectations are very, very different. Their expectations are all based around their values. Their expectations are all about how they interact with the rest of the team. Their expectations are how they gel together as a business and how they work together as a business. So they have this really strong culture where people join and people don't leave. But they get people into year two and they start to perform really, really well. So that pressure of that first 3 months, that first 6 months isn't there. And they're bringing good recruiters in from other recruitment agencies and doing exactly that with them. And what they're finding is that they get people through. But the art of it is what we talked about in one of the biggest mistakes, is that they've really honed in on their recruitment process. They reject far more recruiters than they take on. They're not interested in people's skills. They're not interested in the £1 million biller who can come in and bill £1 million. If they haven't got the right values and behaviours, they do not get through the door. And so one of the biggest reasons that they've said when they ask their candidates that are coming in, that they're recruiting from the recruitment agency, why are you leaving? And it's all the things that you guys have said, plus it's the fact that they get promised absolutely everything and hardly any of those promises are delivered.
Just to add a provocative point here before we move on to the last question, and that is actually something to consider is that, of course, all businesses change over a period of time, they evolve. And there comes a point, and we have to accept this, where the business that an individual joined 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is now when this individual wakes up, he or she wakes up, looks at it, it's not the business they joined, it's changed. Maybe there's been a merger, maybe there's been an acquisition, maybe we've moved into different markets. I mean, there could be any number of reasons, but there's a point very often, I think, for people where over a period of time, there's nothing wrong with the business actually. Everything's fine, but culturally and from an ambition perspective, they no longer feel part of it. They no longer want to be there. It's normal and it's natural. And actually, I would argue that you don't want everybody to come with you for the full span of your journey. Some people join for a period of time at startups or in the middle position, some towards the sort of latter years in an organization. And actually, we have to accept that we can't maintain a static culture. It changes. And over a period of time, some people will look at that culture and think it's not for me any longer. And that's okay. Getting a recycle, fresh blood in is not a bad thing from time to time.
So on this last question, I'm going to open the floodgates for you guys and see how this sort of brings itself together. So the floodgate is going to be this, okay? The question is, if you had to give one game-changing piece of advice for a recruitment leader looking to build a high-performance team, what would it be? So the floodgate is this, because I'm expecting a big rush now. If someone has already said what you're going to say, you've got to choose something different. Therefore, those who goes first is absolutely open. You can say what you like. Those that go last, which is probably going to be me, okay, we'll have to think of something different.
Okay.
So what's the one piece of game-changing advice you'd give a recruitment leader looking to build high-performance teams? What would it be?
Well, let's give Martin the first choice.
Oh,
Then. Go on,
Paul.
Martin.
Oh, Paul, you're too kind.
What happened there?
Hold on, that was the answer. The answer is give Martin the first choice.
Come on, Martin. You get the easy one.
Game changing. So for me, I would say it's around fixed and flexible. So as a leader, you have to understand your non-negotiables within your business, and they have to be clear and succinct and well communicated to your business. Outside of your non-negotiables, let your team play with confidence. Let them experiment and be free to take risks and fail. But get that balance right between we are this, it's fixed, we don't deviate from it. Outside of that, within these boundaries, go and have fun and let them feel like they're building the business and building the culture with you.
Dave?
For me, it's something that somebody told me 30 years ago, and I still think it's really important. For every knockback, give 3 uplifts. Doesn't matter who you're talking to, doesn't matter in what context. If you've got to criticize somebody or point somebody's mistake out, which is absolutely right as a leader and you should do, make sure that it's contextualized with 3 positives. And I've tried to do that. I haven't succeeded always in doing that. But I think it's advice that stood me in good stead with growing businesses.
So mine would be, I think, create a consistent family unit. So make sure that it's a great place to work, that people have fun, they enjoy themselves. Work shouldn't be a day of attrition. It shouldn't be miserable. It shouldn't be, as Martin said, purely around hitting KPIs. It's got to be an enjoyable place. We know in our industry, you said it, Dave, there are a lot more knockbacks than successes. And you're right, you shouldn't harp on the knockbacks. In fact, we shouldn't even talk about them. Focus on the positives, but create an enjoyable environment, a great place to work where people enjoy working with one another and make friends. And I know that sounds a bit glib, but it takes a huge amount of daily work to create that and be consistent with it.
So I think irrespective of the size of the business, as a leader, you have to be present. You have to be absolutely present. So if the business is going through a hard time, you should be helping the business drive out. If the business is going through a good time, you should be driving. And I think what we should be thinking about as a leader is that you're the person at the front driving forward. But when the business is succeeding, you're the person behind everybody, letting them take all the accolades. And I think that's the type of leader that you want. You want a leader that's going to be at the front, pulling, pushing, encouraging, driving people. But when you're succeeding, they're still doing the same thing, but they're still at the back, and they're letting you take the accolades. They're letting the team take the accolades for the performance that the team has created. As a leader, you've just been the catalyst to that performer. And I think that, to me, is, when we talk about the four things that we've come out with there, if you took all of those things and mold them together, you would start to create some really high-performing teams. So it's about being present.
I think we came up with 5 things, and the best bit of advice was the first one. Let Martin go first.
Thanks for that. Right, well, that's it for today, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for your time. It's been very much appreciated. There's been lots and lots of information coming out today. I did put a poll out as well as we were speaking. So if you want to go onto that link or go onto my LinkedIn, I'm sure the guys will put their own LinkedIn posts out soon about what our name should be for our up and coming podcast. So we are looking for your help for that, which would be really interesting to see what people think, because we've all got our own different opinions. But whatever is chosen, we will all embrace it and take it to the grave with us from there. Next week, we're looking at a new podcast, a new webinar next week. So we're looking at what we can be sort of bringing to you from our point of view. So next week, what we're going to start to look at is recruitment leadership, so strategies that drive client and candidate success. And I was at a session yesterday with about 10 or 15 recruitment leaders, and it was really interesting talking the shift between client and candidate success and what's helping them to deliver in 2025. So that'll be a really interesting conversation next week. So Paul, Martin, Dave, thanks for your time, ladies and gents. Thanks for attending, and we shall see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Don't forget to vote. It's the biggest vote of 2025.